Ace Attorney Dual Destinies was a game that I didn't like, but its sequel, Spirit of Justice, is a game that I kinda like. Yeah, nice going me. This is gonna be great for audience retention. Spirit of Justice is the 6th and, as of 2025, most recent game in the mainline Ace Attorney series, and like its predecessor, it was created without the involvement of Shu Takumi, the creator and lead writer/director of the series. And although this game sports a lot of the same flaws as Dual Destinies, and even has some new ones, it also fixes a lot of the issues I had with it. For example, the graphics in this game don't look like absolute penis, so there you go. But before we get into all of that, we need to talk about the game, and before we get into that, hi, my name is Bizaster, and welcome to or back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. Like I said earlier, today we are reviewing Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, but no, that is not all we are doing. Today we are also assigning a rating to the entire Apollo Justice trilogy. Was that exciting enough to warrant the dramatic effect? I don't want to waste any more of your time though, so before we get into the review, let me just give 3 super quick messages. 1, this video contains massive spoilers for Spirit of Justice. 2, Spirit of Justice is a direct sequel to Dual Destinies, and if you haven't seen my video about that game, I'd recommend checking it out with the link above. And 3, if you haven't already, then please consider liking, sharing, and especially subscribing, because I'm super kind of close to hitting 1K, and I'm hoping to hit that goal by the end of the year. Alright, enough fucking around, Spirit of Justice time. Case 1, the foreign turnabout, takes us out of the shoes of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney and puts us into the shoes of Phoenix Wright White Savior. That's right, baby, Phoenix is on a trip to the Kingdom of Khura'in, where he's tasked with spreading his amazing LA lawyer wisdom to this lawless kingdom. But that's the overarching plotline of this game. Well, sort of, and we're not there yet. At this point in time, Phoenix has just landed in the kingdom in order to pay a visit to none other than Maya Fey, who is doing spirit channeling training here. Hey, wait a minute, Maya looks a little different here. This little boy is I'll Be Your Guide, a monk in training / tour guide / merchant / our guide, who has come to view Maya as an older sister figure after spending time with her during her stay in the kingdom. He tells us that, unfortunately, Maya's busy training right now, but fortunately, he can give us a tour of the kingdom. And give us a tour he does, showing us many locations such as definitely not the Taj Mahal, and even tells us about Khura'inese traditions. The people of Khura'in believe in a figure known as the Holy Mother, and regularly perform dances of devotion and songs of ceremony in honor of her. Albie even takes us in to see one of these special performances, and is subsequently arrested for treason. So yeah, in typical Ace Attorney fashion, Phoenix really can't go anywhere without having to defend someone. But something is off here. When we go to the courtroom for Albie's trial the next day, the bailiff seems shocked when we tell him that we're a defense attorney, and the trial we witness is far from a typical one. The prosecutor is at his bench, but there's no defense attorney to be seen at the other bench. Instead, a young woman in regalia stands in front of Albie at the witness stand. The judge mentions something about a seance, and shortly after that delivers a verdict. Guilty. But we won't stand for this ruling, so we object and announce that we will defend Albie. And like the bailiff from before, everyone is shocked. That's when we learn the reality of Khura'in's legal system. A defense attorney hasn't set foot in their courtroom in 20 years, seances are used to determine the accused's guilt, and one thing's especially clear, we are not welcome here. Yeah, I don't know why they sound like that either. But despite this unfamiliar environment, there is a familiar face here. It's Gaspin Payne who's prosecuting in this case. He reveals that after his humiliating loss and turnabout countdown from Dual Destinies, he fled the country and ended up becoming a respected prosecutor here. But in addition to becoming a respected prosecutor here in Khura'in, he has also become very fucking evil. Like, when we request permission to defend Albie, he's like, okay, fine, but if you lose, you will both get the death penalty. Putting Phoenix to death would obviously be evil, but at least there's, like, reason for pain behind it. Like, in Gaspin's eyes, he's responsible for ruining his reputation in America, but Albie is a 9-year-old boy. Like, what the fuck? The most evil things his brother did was, like, having a shitty haircut and being arrogant. Anyways, here's the crime that Albie's being accused of. The Temple, which he showed us earlier and I called the Taj Mahal, was a recent target of theft and murder, with the prized founder's orb being stolen and a security guard, Patrol, being killed. Albie is the suspect because of his connection to the temple via his monk training, combined with his status as the son in a poor family. The prosecution claims that Albie could have easily snuck into the temple to steal the orb, which would have alerted Pot and forced him to kill him. And as if the odds weren't already stacked enough against us, we find out that the seance from earlier almost conclusively points to his guilt. Oh yeah, I should probably explain this whole seance thing, huh? This young girl is Reifa Padma Karain, the princess of the kingdom, who has the ability to perform a divination seance that lets her see the victim's last moments before, dying. Pretty convincing stuff, right? But like I said earlier, it's only almost conclusive. You see, even though Reifa's vision makes Albie look like a murderer, we could be picturing everything wrong. But when we bring this point up, the already angry court gets even angrier at us. Not only are we serving as the defense in a kingdom that hates lawyers, defending someone accused of sacrilegious crimes in a kingdom that's dependent on religion, we are also now doubting a sacred ritual performed by the kingdom's princess. And as this really weird-sounding audience started chanting death threats at us, it made me realize something. This case was about to suck some serious fucking butthole. And spoiler alert, it was some serious fucking butthole. This is the first case in this game, a mere tutorial case, and it's already placing us in a completely new environment, one that's hostile to a pretty stupid extent, when in my opinion at least, more exposition was very much needed. Oh, and don't think that I'm about to let the fact that the primary suspect in this murder-theft combo is a fucking 9-year-old boy slide. Like, once again, I get that this kingdom's legal system is supposed to be royally fucked, but like, come on. This and the amount of hostility the witnesses exhibit towards us is just fucking stupid. But before I launch into full-on complaining mode, let's get back into the mystery. After cross-examining both Albie and the seance, we determined that a third person could have been in the temple with Albie and the victim, but Payne calls a witness named Peace Lubin Understandin, yes that's his real name, to testify that the suspect and the victim were the only ones in the room. Peace Lubin is the head monk of the temple, a musician who plays accompaniments for Karain's religious dances, and the real killer. Oh no, I spoiled it! So yeah, here's what actually happened. Peace Lubin, who's actually a foreigner, heard about the Founder's Orb and moved to the kingdom of Karain. By pretending to be a devout practitioner of Karainism, he was able to become the head monk at the temple, giving him access to the orb and allowing him to steal it. At the same time as this, Patrol, the victim, was also planning to steal the orb, as he, like Albie, was impoverished. By the time he had snuck in to steal it, however, Peace Lubin had already gotten to it, and he decided to steal the box it was housed in instead. On the way out, he encountered Albie and threatened him with his gun, causing him to raise his hands and surrender, which is why it looked like he was about to hit the victim with a blunt object in the seance. In reality, Peace Lubin used the darkly lit nature of the temple at night to his advantage, sneaking behind the victim and hitting him over the head with his sitar, killing him. Because of this newfound information, Albie gets a not guilty verdict and thanks us for our support. But the craziness isn't over yet. We find out that the orb is still missing, and Inga Karul Karain, the kingdom's Minister of Justice, tells us that he was able to cover up our win as an act by a rebel group led by a man named Dirk known as the Defiant Dragons, and essentially tells us to fuck off. This case, to put it simply, does way too much shit for a first case. Like I said earlier, all of the shit that this case threw at us in the introduction stage of the game was just ridiculous, but it's also just way too long. Apollo Justice's first case was similarly longer than the usual first Ace Attorney case, sure, but I like that one because it had a reason and was paced well enough while also still being engaging. But here, you're made to sit through heaps of exposition and unnecessarily lengthy dialogue, especially when it comes to the gallery, who makes strange noises and are cut to for reactions way too often. It has an interesting start and interesting moments, but for the most part, it's just chaotic and weird, which isn't new for Ace Attorney, but it's much more irritating than charming here. That isn't to say that I hated everything about the case though. Albie and his dog were cute, the introduction to the seances actually felt pretty welcome and understandable, the case's overarching mystery was, underneath all the annoying exposition and dialogue, actually pretty interesting and sensible, and as ridiculous as Peace Lubin was, I actually kinda liked him. Like, the part where you accuse him of the murder and he gets so pissed off that his sitar turns into an electric guitar and he starts shredding is actually funny as fuck. Overall though, this case just wasn't good. The 4 in Turnabout gets a 4 in out of 10. Get it? Like, 4 the number, but also 4 in. Get it? Case 2, the Magical Turnabout, actually takes us back to good old Japanifornia, putting us in the perspective of Apollo and Athena. Normally, I'd complain about how this is an interruption of the overarching plot, and while it is, super early in the game too, I was not fucking with the overarching plot so far, so I did not care. This case starts out with Apollo and Athena watching the first act of Trucy's magic show, and after it ends, they go into the dressing room to congratulate her. She's super happy about how the show's going, and even just signed a contract for a TV series. After talking to her for a bit, Bonnie, a fellow magician who will be appearing in Trucy's second act, gives us a cryptic, ominous warning about the dangers of performing magic. Well, that was weird, but whatever, let's just enjoy Act 2 of Trucy's show. Why is there a real dead body in the fake coffin? Because it looks to everyone like Trucy killed the victim, she's arrested, and after meeting a man named Mr. Rettens who claims to be the man behind the scenes, desperately trying to get into the crime scene, we go visit her in the detention center. Here, she tells us that she didn't kill the victim, whose name is Mr. Rias. Why was he in the magic show, you ask? Well, it turns out that he used to be part of Troupe Grammarly from Apollo Justice, but left after an onstage injury 13 years ago. And I'll be honest with you guys, I feel like retroactively introducing a new 5th Troupe Grammarly member was completely random and ham-fisted and detracted from— oh my god, Emma's back! That's right, baby, Emma Skye, Detective Extraordinaire, is back, and if you haven't noticed already, something's different about her in this game. She's happy again? No, well, I mean, yeah, but she's an actual forensic investigator now. Emma gives us permission to investigate the crime scene, because fuck yeah, baby, we can investigate areas and evidence again. And since we obviously choose to defend Trucy, we investigate. And I gotta say, I think this is one of my favorite areas to investigate in this game. There's a lot to explore, a lot of funny banter, and my personal favorite part, you get to dust for fingerprints, whoa! We dust the fake coffin for fingerprints and end up finding out some mysterious info. Some of the fingerprints don't match any of the ones we have on file, and the ones belonging to Mr. Reyes are positioned backwards. Emma also tells us that in court we'll be facing Nayuta Sadmandi, who's this game's new prosecutor. But not only is he new, he's also the worst prosecutor in the series. Well, the mainline series at least. I've never played the Professor Layton spin-off. Unlike Black Quill from the last game, who I didn't really like or dislike, I really just do not like Nayuta, and that's because he was just so fucking boring. For most of the game, he's a generic, self-righteous asshole, and his motives for acting the way he does don't make much sense. But we'll talk more about him later. After all, we're not even talking about the trial yet. We investigate for a little while longer before eventually running into Mr. Rettens again, and in a crazy twist, we find out that his first name is actually Roger and not Mr. When we talk to him, we learn some new info. He's a TV producer, with his alibi for the crime being that he was in the middle of shooting at a TV studio, and he has a burning hatred for magicians, especially Troupe Grammarly. Moving on, we talk to Bonnie in the dressing room again, and she tells us that she's a big fan of Trucy's, and gives us access to the underway passage that the magicians use to create the effects of tricks from under the stage. But before we can investigate it, Rettens bursts in again, telling us that his studio is going to have to cancel Trucy's TV show, which, according to the contract she signed, will result in a $3 million fine. So forget investigating the underway passage for now, we need to talk to Trucy about this. Just as we thought, Trucy clearly remembers the contract she signed not having that whole thing be a part of it. And when we go back to the dressing room to look at the clipboard the contract was on, we discover a sheet of carbon paper hidden inside of it. In other words, Trucy was conned. Putting this issue on hold for now, we investigate the understage area, discovering a sword that's nearly identical to the one that was used as a murder weapon, except that this one's rubber, meaning that someone must have swapped it out with a real sword. But all of a sudden, we hear voices coming closer and we hide. And as it turns out, these voices belong to none other than Bonnie and Rettens, and the former is acting quite different than we've seen so far. We end up visiting the TV studio that Rettens claims gives him an alibi, and receive a copy of the footage of the magic show, which I think is the first example of video evidence in the series, which is really cool. Anyways,
don't hate me cause I'm beautiful.
In court, we find out some crazy shit. First of all, the mean Bonnie we saw earlier was not Bonnie at all. Rather, it was her twin sister, Betty. And second of all, Roger Rettens is actually Mr. Rias. But wait, if he's Mr. Rias, then who's the victim? Well, after a while, we find out. It all started 13 years ago. Rias, during a show with Troupe Grammarly, accidentally burned himself while performing a fire trick, which led to Magnify deeming him to be too untalented and kicking him out. Since then, he's had a grudge against the troupe, and he saw Trucy's magic act as the perfect opportunity to exact his revenge. You see, the great magician Mr. Rias had become TV producer Roger Rettens, and after discovering that Trucy was the daughter of Zach Grammarly, he exacted his elaborate crime. Rias worked with Betty, who had a grudge against Trucy, telling her that they would prank Trucy on camera to humiliate her, but in reality he set up a contraption under the stage to kill the victim before putting him in the coffin, framing Trucy for the murder. And that's not it. The contract he had her sign would go into effect, sending her into a practically unpayable debt. Not to mention, he attempts to repossess the Write Anything agency. This dude is fucked up. Luckily, we're able to fit all of the pieces together and get Rias arrested. But wait, if Rias committed the crime, who was the victim? Why, he was none other than Man of Mystery, Rias' protege. Yeah, this was kinda dumb. Like, the mystery with the victim was cool at first, but then the whole time it just turns out to be some fucking guy. After the trial, Bonnie and Betty, especially Betty, are in shock, unable to believe that they were used by Rias as accomplices in the murder. They want to atone for what they did, and Betty even admits that she has a secret admiration for Trucy. Aww, and speaking of Trucy, her life goes back to normal, with her magic show returning. All's well that ends well, right? I liked this case. It was, thankfully, a massive improvement over the first one, and it did a lot of shit right. Defending Trucy was awesome and allowed for some fantastic character development, and Rias was such a great villain. Sure, he was a little over the top, but he was such a cunt and I wanted to kick his ass so badly, so they did a good job with that. He also had a pretty great twist reveal too. The introduction of video evidence examination, the reintroduction of Emma, and as a result, forensic investigations were sick, and the supporting characters like Bonnie and Betty were good too. I enjoyed them. Bonnie was especially cute. Oh, and of course, it was so awesome being able to investigate areas and evidence again. It was just I don't know why it was ever removed. Unfortunately though, the case is far from perfect. The decision to retroactively introduce a completely new Troop Grammarly member was kinda stupid, and as much as I liked Bonnie and Betty, it kinda felt like the whole game was trying to redo the whole Iris and Dahlia twin dynamic thing, but to a much less cool extent. Also, like I said earlier, making the real victim just some random fucking dude was idiotic, as was, well, Nayuta existing. Overall though, the Magical Turnabout is a very fun and solid filler case, and I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Oh, also, I don't know why Magnify kicked Rias out of Troop Grammarly. He was a perfect fit there, because he's a fucking scumbag. The Rite of Turnabout, like Turnabout Academy from the last game, broke the third case curse by not being the worst case in the game. Unlike Turnabout Academy, however, this case is actually good. In fact, it's the best one in the game. So this case puts us back in Phoenix's shoes again, meaning that, once again, we're in Khura'in. But it's not just any ordinary day in Khura'in. Today is the Purification Rite, which is only performed once a year. And it's especially exciting this year because Maya is performing it. That's right, baby, in this case we finally meet up with Maya again, and I'm glad they waited until this game to bring her back, because if she was in Dual Destinies, she might have looked scary as fuck. We talk to Maya and she tells us about the rite. It's a very important part of Khura'inese culture, and the role she's playing is usually played by the High Priest's wife, but because she's pregnant this year, she's acting as a stand-in. The celebration's inspired by Lady Kira, a woman who fought long ago to establish the kingdom of Khura'in. In recent times, however, she's also become a symbol against resistance, as someone disguised as her, donning her robes and dagger, has been hunting and capturing members of the rebel group the Defiant Dragons. But with all of that out of the way, let's get into the rite. Those who are watching the rite have to stay in a prayer position, so Phoenix gets into it as well. And we've seen our fair share of murderers in the aceattorney franchise, but don't let that distract you from the real killer, back pain. So yeah, Phoenix's back starts hurting while he's in the kneeling position and he fucking faints. He wakes up in the High Priest's house, and apparently we missed a lot while we were out. Maya's been accused of and arrested for a murder. We rush to the crime scene where we meet up with Emma, who's here because Nayuta requested her detective services. She tells us that Tarust Inmi, the High Priest, is the victim, and Maya's the sole suspect, being the only person besides him in the inner sanctum. It's also believed that he was killed with Lady Kira's dagger. We go to investigate the inner sanctum, where we find a familiar face, Rafa from Case 1. She's still pissed off at us thanks to the results from that trial and is convinced that Maya's the killer. We ask her if we can investigate the scene and she allows us, but only under intense scrutiny from her, as she's convinced that we plan to forge evidence. So Rafa pretty much becomes our assistant, and oh man, there is a lot to unpack about her character, okay. She's similar to Franziska in Case 4 of the first Investigations game, which I haven't even made a video about yet, but ignore that. She has this spoiled brat princess vibe that's intended to be annoying but also slightly endearing, but Rafa comes off as more annoying than anything. I'll get more into her character later, but it's like, I don't know, seeing her get flustered after we discover shit like her love for the Plume Punisher, Karine's version of the Steel Samurai, is a lot less cute when she was trying to give a 9-year-old boy the death penalty in the first case we had with her. Anyways, after investigating the crime scene with her, we talked to a weird man and then moved to the detention center to talk to Maya. Maya tells us that the High Priest and his wife had been letting her stay with them, and the High Priest was a very kind spirit channeling trainer to her, and she couldn't imagine killing him. However, she's unsure of what really went down. All she remembers from the rite is feeling really sleepy and then waking up to the High Priest being dead. The next place we visit is the High Priest's house, where we talk to his wife, Belib. She claims to be unsure of why someone would want to kill Tarust, but when she says this, 3 Cyclocks appear. And after we break them, she tells us that a letter from the rebel hunter had been sent to him, warning him not to perform the rite. Soon after this, however, the Queen requests an audience with her, so we tag along. After a brief discussion with Queen Garan, who's Princess Raifa's mom, she leaves with Raifa and Belib, leaving us stuck with Inga, who is actually Raifa's dad. Once again, he warns us to watch ourselves, and tells us that the only reason we won in case 1 was because Gaspin pressed false charges. According to him, though, we won't be as lucky this time around because we're facing Nayuta again. I do. I want an opponent that's not a boring little bitch. Before the trial, we talked to Maya in the detention center again, and she excitedly tells us about her ultra-rare plumed Punisher strap, which she traded her Steel Samurai watch for. Trust me, there's a reason why I'm bringing that up. It becomes relevant in a second. You know what they say, a true magician never reveals their secrets. Well, fuck you, Troop Grammarly, I'm revealing mine. When I talk about the individual cases in these reviews, I usually only cover information from the first investigation day and the last trial day. I do this in order to ensure that the length of these reviews aren't completely fucking insane. Why am I bringing this up, you may ask? Well, to tell you that there are 2 reasons why I'm not talking about the first trial in this case. The first reason is what I just talked about, and the second reason is that it's pretty much pointless as fuck. So yeah, remember the weird dude we talked to for a little while earlier? Well, he ends up being Dats Aribal, the right-hand man of the Defiant Dragons leader Dirk, as well as an escaped prisoner. The first trial essentially just consists of him maybe being a possible suspect, but then he's not, and then he drops the big reveal of who he is and escapes. So basically, the trial is pretty much just an excuse to introduce him. So let's just move on to the second trial. This trial is fucking insane. Like, insane as in there are 2 murders we are now trying to solve, and Maya ends up channeling Tarust. So yeah, a second person, Pere Zealot, a monk who was also living with Maya and the Enmi family, is found dead on the second day of investigation, and of course, Maya suspected of that murder too. But thanks to the combined powers of spirit channeling and lawyering, we get to the bottom of the case. Here's what really happened. Tarust and his wife, Belib, were both secretly rebels, and they weren't the only ones with secret identities. Pere was both a member of Karine's secret police, run by Inga, and the Rebel Hunter. Under the guise of being a monk, he was taken in by the Enmi family, along with Maya, who found out that Belib was a huge fan of the Plumed Punisher, and traded her rare Steel Samurai watch for her Plumed Punisher strap. One day, Pere discovered Belib at the rebel hideout and tried to attack her, and she killed him in self-defense. This caused the Steel Samurai watch to sound, and Tarust heard the sound thanks to the microphone he had planted in the hideout. When he realized what had happened, he tried to protect her by framing Maya. During the rite, he drugged her with a sleeping pill, which caused her to, well, fall asleep, and tried his best to frame her for his death, while in reality he killed himself. He told Belib none of this, fearing that she would try to stop him. Except now, we are in court, where Belib has heard all of this. It's at this point that the true nature of this case gets revealed. It's a tragedy, one consisting of a multitude of accidents. This scene with Belib saying her final goodbyes to Tarust is deeply emotional and damn near tear-jerking, until it cuts to the sprite of Tarust wearing Maya's clothes, which is funny as fuck. But the case isn't over yet. We find Raifa, who's clearly very upset and conflicted. I mean, she just found out that her own father was endorsing state-sanctioned murder with the whole Pere situation, and her seances have brought about false charges. But there's no time to think about that because there's an explosion in the courthouse and Dats escapes with Belib. Case 3 was good for many reasons. We finally got to see Maya again for the first time in a while, and although having to defend her again was kinda stupid and overdone, it was still funny to see that she still has the worst luck of all time. The plethora of twists was a bit excessive, but the twists themselves were super impactful, and the ending was really emotional and touching. Also, I don't care how small of a plus this is, the visual gag with Believe showing the pictures of Tarust was incredible. I found it really funny. Like, at first it's like, oh, this grieving woman has pictures to remember her husband by, but then it's like, she has pictures of him getting angry and shit, and all of the photos appear to be from, like, the same photo shoot. Like, it made me laugh every time it happened. I wish they did it more. The only two problems I really had with the case were that the first trial was pretty much pointless and felt like an excuse to introduce stats and have a break between the two murders. Notice how I didn't use any footage from the first trial aside from when I was complaining about it, and it didn't have any impact on my summary of the crime. And the attempt to make Rafa a sympathetic character didn't quite hit the mark. Those problems, especially the first one, were pretty fucking significant though, and weighed down my enjoyment of the case. But still, I'd give The Right of Turnabout a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that case was pretty good. I hope the next one is too. Fuck! It's not. Oh yeah, skip to the timestamp displayed on screen if you don't want to hear me rant about a stupid YouTube video. Even if you don't know anything about Ace Attorney, chances are you've probably seen or heard of Phoenix Wright Disgraced Attorney, or as I like to call it, the worst animated video to ever grace this godforsaken site. Fuck this video. Oh my god, I've been waiting so long to say that. The video itself sucks. It's stupid, unfunny, and gets a laughable amount of information wrong. Phoenix is the prosecutor, while Edgeworth is the defense attorney. Edgeworth is straight instead of a raging homosexual. The two shouldn't even be here because, oh yeah, spoiler, this video is based off of a case where Athena is the defense attorney. This character, Geiru Tenero, is pretty much the main joke of this animation because, ooh, she's a hot woman with big boobs and dresses funny and sex. Isn't this funny? Isn't this fucking funny? Fuck this video. But while the video sucks, it was the outcome of it that was the worst part. For months, literal fucking months, you couldn't find anything Ace Attorney related on social media that wasn't related to Geiru in this stupid video. I had to unfollow the goddamn Ace Attorney hashtag on Instagram for a while because every post was this stupid fucking clown, and it wasn't even fans of the series that were doing most of it either. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to act all gatekeepy. Ace Attorney deserves more recognition, and even if you don't plan to play the games, fuck it, draw a character because you think they look cool, that's awesome. What isn't awesome is when my fucking feed is flooded with a bunch of gooner fucking losers posting bullshit like this. In conclusion, I forgot I was talking about this case, let's keep doing that. I wish I could say that Turnabout Storyteller was better than that fuck-ass video, but it really isn't, it just sucks. And not just because of Geiru either. Let's take a look at this case to see why exactly it's so bad. So like I said during my dumbass little rant, we play as Athena in this case, and one cool thing I should point out is that this is her first solo case. She handles it entirely on her own without any help from Phoenix, Apollo, or anyone else. Foreshadowing. We're tasked with defending this man, Bucky Wet, who shows up drunk to his own trial, doesn't take Athena seriously, and reveals that the only reason he has a job is because his dad runs the soba shop he works at. Wow, what a likable character I want to defend. That's not all about him though, he's also Black Quill's friend. So yeah, surprise, Black Quill has friends and is also in this case. And can I be honest with you, I kinda wish that he wasn't. Like I said earlier, I don't have any strong feelings about Black Quill, but in this case he pisses me the fuck off. He's such an asshole to Athena, he's always making comments about how she's just a rookie, and won't be prepared to defend her client, and it's just not an endearing dynamic at all. But hey, at least Athena proves him wrong during the trial, right? Foreshadowing. Speaking of the trial, let's get to that. Here's what happened. The victim, Taifu Tornado, the victim was one of those good old LA Rakugo storytellers. You find them everywhere. The victim, Taifu Tornado, a Rakugo storyteller, was suffocated to death via an undetermined method in his dressing room. The reason why Bucky's the suspect is because he went to the Rakugo theater at the request of the victim, and because the victim had supposedly stolen the deed making Bucky the head of the soba shop, that gives him a motive. Aside from Black Quill, there are two witnesses in this case, Uendo and Geiru Tenero, who were the victim's disciples. As Uendo testifies, we discover that Taifu's Karuta cards, which were found at the crime scene, were rearranged, originally spelling out O in fourth instead of wet number 4. Uendo was the one that rearranged the cards, but here's the thing. He actually has dissociative identity disorder, and one of his alters discovered the body, meaning his actions technically weren't his. I'll talk more about that in a bit, but for now we have another important piece of information. He was set to become Taifu's successor despite the fact that Geiru had more experience. This gives Geiru a motive to have killed Taifu, and fortunately we're able to get her to testify. Unfortunately, the only reason she comes back to the stand is because the judge is like, oh, how I yearn to look at the large, voluptuous breasts of that woman. Anyways, we get to the bottom of the case, proving that Geiru was, in fact, the killer. Here's what actually happened. Geiru killed Taifu by suffocating him in udon dough that he was using after he named Uendo as his successor instead of her. She then cooked soba noodles and shoved his face into the bowl to cover her tracks, and rearranged Taifu's Karuta cards to write out Owen 4th to frame Uendo, as Owen was Uendo's secret 4th altar. When Uendo discovered the scene, he rearranged the cards to spell out wet number 4, framing Bucky. So yeah, this case is pretty flawed. Bucky's an annoying defendant, Black Quill's an ass, Geiru's a walking fan service machine, and it's such obvious filler. But hey, at least we get to witness Athena taking down a culprit all by herself, right? No! For some fucking reason, Black Quill constantly jumps in to save Athena and make points, and is somehow allowed to, despite the fact that he is a prosecutor and, in this case, is just a witness. This pissed me the fuck off. Are women incapable of doing things on their own, Ace Attorney? Is that the message you're trying to send here? Not everything about the case is awful. I enjoyed Uendo's character enough. From what I can tell, he was pretty good DID representation, even if stuff like the use of personalities instead of alters wasn't great. It was nice to see more of the Ace Attorney franchise not demonizing mental health, because a lot of other fictional media does that. Also, rearranging the cards in that one section was cool, and the case was short, which is nice. But none of that's enough to make this case good, so in conclusion, Turnabout Storyteller gets a 4 out of 10. Athena deserved a much better first case. Turnabout Revolution is a really divisive case amongst Ace Attorney fans. It seems that one half loves it and the other half hates it, and there's very little middle ground. I'm a part of this middle ground as I thought that the case was just okay. We start out in the perspective of Apollo, who is hanging at the Write Anything agency with Trucy and watching the news when all of a sudden Dirk comes in. That's right, the feared Karaini's rebel leader who we are seeing for the first time in the final case of the game. When we talk to him, gross. He and Apollo reveal to us and Trucy that Apollo grew up in his care in Karain, and Nayuta is Dirk's actual son and Apollo's stepbrother. Add this to the Apollo backstory counter. You probably don't need me to tell you that this is a pretty crazy piece of lore to drop at the very end of the game. So how do they get around it? These fucking writers! So random and sudden new backstory aside, Dirk reveals to us that the reason why he's here is because he and the rest of the Defiant Dragons want to acquire the Founder's Orb, which is in Karain Village. A doctor in the village named Archie Buff has it and has agreed to give it to Dirk, and Dirk wants us to be his lawyer for taking ownership of it. So we agree to help him, and off we go. Okay, status update, Dr. Buff is fucking dead, and we have to investigate the scene with Emma. We sort of meet Army Buff, Archie's shut-in daughter, but she communicates with us via a drone. And the investigation gives us some good leads. I think we'll be able to solve this case. Oh, hey, I think we found our culprit. So this sketchy, grinning man is politician, can you guess what his job is? And he claims to have ownership over the Founder's Orb. For now, we talk to some other Karain residents, such as Pearl. Pearl tells us that Paul has been campaigning in the village lately, much to the dismay of the residents, and that the victim went into Mount Mitama cave with the orb. Safely assuming that the orb is probably somewhere in the cave, Apollo and Dirk venture out there. In the cave, Apollo and Dirk get pushed into a pit and have to find their way out. This segment's actually pretty gripping and exciting, and as we find a way out, we find the Founder's Orb. But unfortunately, once we get back to Karain Village, Phoenix is there and being really fucking annoying. He says that he'll be representing Paul in court in order to give him ownership of the Founder's Orb, and is just, in general, being an ass to us. In court, we find out that Paul killed Dr. Buff, and the reason why Phoenix was acting so weird and supporting him was because he and a mysterious second party were holding Maya for ransom. But luckily, we find a way to both charge Paul and save Maya. The reason why they kidnapped Maya and desperately tried to get the orb was so she could channel the founder of Karain, and with Maya dead, they wouldn't be able to channel anyone. With this plot thwarted, we take our goofy seeming but actually really fucked up culprit down. Also, there's a really sweet moment with Army, the victim's daughter, now in person. But there's still something to take care of. Maya needs to be rescued, so we make our way to Karain where we rescue Maya and find the person who worked with Paul, none other than Inga Karul Karain, the Minister of Justice and Rifa's dad. Remember him? Well, it doesn't matter because he's fucking dead. Dirk is accused of and arrested for murdering him, and it's our job to defend him. But we're not alone. Edgeworth and Rafa are here to help us. I'll talk more about her later, but Rafa losing her father and finding out about how evil he was takes a toll so huge on her that it actually turns her into a pretty likable character. Like, she goes through some serious character growth in this case. The trial following this investigation is the last one in the case, and it is crazy. The prosecutor's none other than Queen Garan, who, surprise, turns out to be just as evil as her now deceased husband, and we uncover some even more crazy shit. Nena, the old woman who aids Rafa in her animations from earlier, who I forgot to mention, turns out to be Amara, the former queen of Karine in disguise. She used to be romantically involved with Dirk, and Dirk has been dead this entire time. No, I'm serious. A little while prior to the case, when Maya first got kidnapped, Dirk went to go rescue her and was shot and killed by Inga. His last request was for Maya to channel him so he could go visit Apollo, his adopted son, one last time. Even if the whole thing seems kind of ridiculous, it's 1, explained better in the game, and 2, actually pretty emotionally impactful, even if we did not really know Dirk. So Inga killed Dirk, and Maya was no longer channeling Dirk when we found her, so the question is, who killed Inga? Well, Garan did, and we prove her guilt in court. Oh, also, Nayuta realizes that he's been working for a corrupt system and redeems himself or whatever, but that all happens in like the last hour of the game and he's still boring as fuck, so whatever. This case did a lot of things right. The overarching mystery was interesting, it let us go back to Karine Village, the whole getting trapped in a cave thing and the puzzle box segment were cool, Army was cute, Edgeworth came back gayer than ever, and I actually ended up liking Rafa to an extent. The twists were also fucking insane too, like the reveal that Dirk was dead the whole time actually threw me for a loop. But the case also fucks up pretty badly on a lot of fronts. In case you didn't notice, they pulled a Clay Terran with Dirk. He appears out of fucking nowhere to give Apollo a last minute new stupid backstory, and the game tries to force us to care about their relationship even though we are just meeting Dirk. Hell, he even ends up being dead before the events of the case. And aside from that whole thing, Phoenix was extremely annoying during the first trial, Inga randomly died after being built up to be a huge villain, the reveal that Nena was Amara is kind of ridiculous, let's be honest, and Garan was a stupid and comically evil villain. Not to mention, the case was so long, and I have mixed feelings about the ending. Oh, yeah, the ending. Apollo decides to stay in Karine as a lawyer. It mainly pissed me off. If Apollo stays in Karine for the 7th game, I will be so mad, but realistically, he'll probably just pull a Maya and come back in like the next game, so. In the end, Turnabout Revolution is just okay. It's an okay conclusion to an okay game, and I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Except we're not actually done, because we still need to talk about this game's DLC case, Turnabout Time Traveler. And of course, like with Turnabout Revolution from the previous game, I won't be counting this case's score towards the final rating. So Phoenix, Athena, and Trucy are fucking around at the Right Anything agency when all of a sudden, none other than Larry Butts runs in. But he's not alone, he's joined by a woman named Ellen Wyatt, who has been accused of murdering a man by the name of, Dumbass Gloomsbury. She needs a defense attorney, and Larry brought her in hoping that we would defend her. One interesting thing I want to point out really quickly is that Larry's theme has been modernized for this game, and I like it. For the most part, I mean, on one hand, I really like how they changed it and updated it to give it a feel that's more unique to this game, but on the other hand, I definitely prefer the original. I mean, this remade version doesn't really have that goofy but also fight or flight triggering vibe to it. Anyways, some shenanigans happen. I'm gonna end it all? Dude, we're like 5 minutes into the case, and then Emma comes in to bring Ellen to the detention center for questioning. In the detention center, Ellen informs us that she was set to marry Soren Sprocket, a young man belonging to the apparently famous Sprocket family. During the reception, however, she was attacked by the victim, and as he was about to push her off the Vista deck, she made a wish upon a pendant Soren gave to her and went back to before the reception began. That can't be right, so it's time to investigate. But we're not alone, because Larry's here with he ran off to talk to a woman. But we're not alone, because Edgeworth and Maya show up. Edgeworth is leaving with Larry to question him. But we're not alone, because Maya's still here. Okay, all jokes aside, Edgeworth tells us that he'll be the lead prosecutor in this case, and Maya tells us that she'll help us investigate. The two of us run into Emma again at the crime scene, and she gives us some more background about the incident. The victim was the lead servant of the Sprocket household, and the defendant was his co-worker / the live-in maid for the family. Apparently, the family was opposed to the marriage between her and Soren. Oh, and also the murder weapon was a clock called the Timekeeper. After investigating the scene, we run into Soren himself. But aside from telling us that he thinks time travel is possible and that he's researching it, he doesn't seem very interested in talking to us. Who is interested in talking to us, however, is Pierce Nickety, the family's butler, who gives us some very important information. Soren had an older sister, Selena, who tragically died in a car accident. Pierce himself believes that Ellen killed Dumbass in self-defense. Anyways, Edgeworth, sit your ass down, we know damn well that you're a bottom. One more investigation and 2 trials later, we finally get to the bottom of the case. It all started many years ago when Selena Sprocket met her unfortunate, premature demise in a car crash. However, she didn't die instantly and she wasn't the only victim. Her brother Soren was critically injured as well. Pierce Nickety, who was actually a surgeon and Selena's fiancé, operated on Soren first, which Selena had requested, leading to her dying from her injuries while her brother survived. This caused Pierce to resent Soren, and on the day of his wedding with Ellen, he set out to get his revenge. Pierce had Dumbass try to kill Ellen, but unfortunately for them, Soren jumped in to help her, knocking Dumbass unconscious with the timekeeper. Believing that he was dead, Soren and Pierce, who, in Soren's mind, had nothing to do with any of this, hid him inside of one of the large lanterns at the wedding reception. To cover up the incident, the entire Sprocket family gaslit Ellen into believing that they had traveled back in time to hold the reception again. Dumbass regained consciousness during the reception, and in a panic, Pierce bludgeoned him to death with the timekeeper, framing Ellen in a last-ditch attempt to get back at Soren. Similarly to the last case, this one is also relatively divisive amongst aceattorney fans, with the vast majority of people finding it to be mediocre. I, however, thought that it was good. Sure, having to operate under the guise that time travel was real for a good percentage of the case was stupid. Ellen was kind of an annoying client, mainly due to her overly long animations. Pierce was kind of an obvious culprit due to seeming suspicious as fuck throughout the case, and Larry was super flanderized. But there was a lot to like, too. The overarching mystery was, aside from the time travel bullshit, pretty interesting. Pierce was a really cool villain, even if he was a pretty obvious one. Larry being back was awesome, even if he was flanderized, and investigating with Maya and battling Edgeworth again was great, too. Soren was also a pretty good character, and the ending of the case was really sweet. Also, I think that Ellen is the only client who's interacted with the glass in the detention center. I don't know why that's interesting to me, but it is. I don't know, I just find it cool. All in all though, I actually like this DLC case less than the one in Dual Destinies, which is kinda surprising given how I very much prefer this game to that one. Turnabout Time Traveler gets a 7 out of 10. Now that we've covered all of the cases, let's move on to talking about the non-story elements of Spirit of Justice, the characters, art, and music. Let's start off with the characters. The returning characters, Phoenix, Apollo, Athena, Emma, Trucy, Maya, Pearl, Blackquill, Edgeworth, and Larry are a mixed bag. But let's start out with the good comebacks. Emma, Trucy, Maya, Pearl, Edgeworth, and Larry were all really nice to see again, especially Maya, who we haven't officially seen since Trials and Tribulations. No, I'm not counting the Investigations cameos. I'd say that the best comebacks were Emma, Trucy, and Edgeworth. Emma feels like she's gone through actual character progression, becoming an actual forensic investigator. Trucy has her own focus case and feels like an actual character again, instead of the one-note throwaway character she was throughout most of Dual Destinies, and facing off against Edgeworth again was really refreshing and nice. Although it was great to see Maya, Pearl, and Larry again, the big problem the three of them share is that they feel pretty flanderized. Larry's the biggest victim of this, with his hopeless idiot trait being the only one the writers really focused on, and they really liked retreading old ground with the Fae girls too. Pearl especially, because both this game and Dual Destinies have yet to convince me that she's not still an 8-year-old. Now, to talk about Blackquill and the 3 main characters. Blackquill's easy, he was in one case and he was an asshole in it, so he was easily the worst comeback. But as for Phoenix, Apollo, and Athena, Apollo has literally nothing to do with the overarching plot of the game up until the very last case where he has a new stupid backstory. Athena feels more like a side character than anything. Hell, her focus case is hella short and is the worst one in the game, and Phoenix is extremely relevant, despite having pretty much no emotional connection to the story. It's not like I hated seeing these 3 again. Well, Phoenix's role really shouldn't be as prominent as it was in the original trilogy anymore, but that's a video for another time. As for the new characters, my personal favorites were Albie because he was cute, Bonnie and Betty for the same reason, Army also for the same reason, Dats because he was cool, even though I barely talked about him, and same with Soren. The only character I had mixed feelings on was Reifa. Like I said earlier, her character development felt really undercooked and came in a little late in the game, but she was still cute enough and her development was genuinely interesting to watch unfold. The worst new characters were Nayuta because his development sucked and he was boring and stupid, and like every character from Case 4. Moving on to the art, it's good, which is great coming from Dual Destinies. In case you haven't played that game or seen my video on it, just know that the graphics kinda suck. The models are stiff and janky, the expressions look weird and jarring, the environments are kinda bland, and the animations don't look quite right. But in this game, the graphics are much more akin to the graphics in games like the Great Ace Attorney. There's a lot of life breathed into their sprites, models, environments, and animations, and it's really refreshing to see, even as someone who prefers the classic 2D graphics. The anime cutscenes here are also even better than the ones in Dual Destinies. As for the music, I mean, it's an Ace Attorney game, the music's fantastic. The updated tracks are great, and the new tracks, especially the Karain Town theme and Nayuta's theme, which was too good for that boring fucker, are great too. I'll move on to assigning my final ratings for both the game and the Apollo Justice trilogy in a sec, but first, there's a specific pro and some cons that I haven't talked about yet. The one pro I haven't covered is that this game, like Dual Destinies, has other outfits that the characters can wear. This was especially cool to see in this game because of the better graphics. As for the cons, okay, the pacing in this game is fucked. You spend 2 of the cases in Karain, 2 in America, and the final one in both. This is whatever until you remember that the 2 American cases are fucking filler adventures. Like I said, I liked Case 2, but it has jack shit to do with the rest of the overarching plot, and it makes it really weird. To say that it interrupts the flow of the story is an understatement, especially since you constantly shift from character to character, and the game randomly becomes about Apollo at the end. And Capcom, if you're watching, there's an easy fix to this. If having 3 main characters doing different things gets complicated, then how about you get rid of one of the main characters? How about you stop making Phoenix a main character when his story has been over for 2 games now? I'll make a video about this topic at some other time, but holy fuck, give the other 2 characters the spotlight, Jesus. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice, so now it's time to assign a rating to both this game and the Apollo Justice trilogy as a whole. I'd give Spirit of Justice a 6 out of 10. It's above average, making it better than Dual Destinies, but it's still not great. And because of all the issues I mentioned earlier, it's one of the less good Ace Attorney games. As for the Apollo Justice trilogy, I'm giving it the same rating. It started out strong with the titular first game, but then it was followed up by easily the worst game in the series, then concluded with this game in a serviceable but still underwhelming way. One of my biggest criticisms of the Apollo Justice trilogy is its misleading title. Sure, it's called the Apollo Justice trilogy, but it is barely about Apollo. Something I didn't mention about this game and Dual Destinies is that they both contain Phoenix Wright in the title, not Apollo Justice. That alone perfectly encapsulates how this trilogy views him. He's a character that just kinda takes a backseat to the main plot. He's relevant at times, sure, but only when he's forced to. Even the first game, which was easily the best one in this trilogy, didn't even give him a backstory. The Apollo Justice trilogy is good, but compared to the original trilogy, the Great Ace Attorney games, and the Investigations collection, it's easily the weak link of the franchise, and I'm gonna have to give it a 6 out of 10. But with all of that said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please like, share, and especially subscribe. This video took a lot of work, and it really helps me out. Also, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this game, and let me know if you want to see me talk about the Great Ace Attorney, the Investigations games, and more in the comments below. I hope to see you in the next one, but until then, bye!